connect, it says. Hold on, it's live now.
Well, it's more narcissism with Brenda. It's been amazing. Some food with Brenda, a little yoga. I'm always scared of yoga. I'm like, am I gonna get like to the point where I just come in here like a laser beam? Like when I run, I can't. I look forward to it today. I'm like, when can I run?
Have you run already?
No, because I lost energy when I was in here doing yoga. It takes so much tremendous energy and focus. So you need to sleep. Like people talk about, I want to do hot yoga. I'm like, have you ever done yoga? Like I'm like, oh, hot yoga. There's no way.
You and Christy have done amazing, and I was just mentioning that prior. Good morning, everyone. I didn't get to address everyone as a collective. Yes, it is an exquisite day out there.
Look nice today.
Oh, thank you. You as well. I guess we're both in black.
Yes.
It hides a multitude of sins, doesn't it? Yeah, right. We know. Go with that black. But we've had an exquisite week thus far. You know, God has been good to us. It's been temperate weather. I call it Napa Valley weather, one of my favorite places in the world to go, because you wake up and this is what inspires the grapes to taste as good as they do in the wine, actually, is these cool temps in the morning, and at night you can get a lot done and enjoy the evening after work. And I'm trying to, the subject
dinner on Saturday, so I get to see
I got a nice meal planned. And I did a little investigation as to what you both like. So I'm going to put together something scrumptious and local, yummy compilation of the local harvest.
My smash burger was local from across. They
have their own
farm, and they're world-renowned chefs.
I had their gluten-free pizza for the first time the other evening, actually, and it was exceptional.
How do you know there's no gluten in there?
Well, there might be a smidget here.
No. I'm just wondering because
because
gluten. You know, I like to eat healthy, but I also like to eat. So like, there's this meeting of the food and the health.
That's what we call. We're going back to a balanced.
Yes.
You know, like you mentioned, corn, and corn is kind of coming upon the scene. Corn is fabulous. You can have corn. It's hard to digest the cellulose, which is the covering encases the corn kernel itself. What's inside it is digestible. That's why we see the residuals in the, in the pot.
Yes.
Because the cellulose in the corn, you cannot digest that. But the nutrients can be extracted and digestible. So and it's the most ubiquitous grain, actually. A lot of people think wheat is the most ubiquitous grain.
What's ubiquitous?
The most well-known, I'm sorry, me and these big words.
Plentiful?
Yes.
Abundant?
Yeah, it's around. Yeah, I have to cut off those words.
So corn is a big one.
Yes, corn actually, Michael Pollan has written numerous books about nutrition, and he was the one that enlightened me about that, actually, because my perception was wheat was the most well-known grain. In actuality, it's corn, and that's why other animals are fed corn in lieu of the things that they really need.
So recapping last week with narcissism, where we left off so we can pick up today. We left off with, can you kind of recap a little bit on where we left off?
Yes, I do have to kind of go through it maybe, because sometimes I go back and review what I've discussed, and there's some nuances that were left out or things, nuggets of information that I failed to mention, because I try to create refinement and understanding in the public.
You're doing a great job.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that, because sometimes, like I said, being an instructor has helped me tremendously, because I really don't have any formal training in public speaking, and I listen to my videos and I say, if I say you know one more time, I'm going to shoot myself in the arse.
Well, real formal training.
I try to be cognizant of like how people receive and the information.
Well, you're doing a great job.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. But it's heavy information. I've been discussing. This is a epidemic. Some of the experts are saying it's a pandemic. To reiterate, where do I garner my knowledge from? Many of the experts, what I do is take their information, process it, and what I do is collectively try to explain it and break it down where I understand it first, so I can explain it, so the public has a blanket understanding what we are all incurring. Inevitably, we encounter these individuals in our lives, and we will continue to.
And it helps us become better, because we have, I have these tendencies, so.
I do too. Like I said, it's out of spectrum.
Say, I gotta get better. I look at it, I'm like,
we keep ourselves in check.
So.
We can catch ourselves. The word is awareness.
Just to be kinder, more like, looking in and saying, sometimes when I'm in the grind or whatever you want to call it in my day, sometimes I'm so deeply focused that I don't realize, and I hurt people's feelings, and I'm like, oh man, I didn't mean to do that.
Well, do you go back and make
And say
restitution?
sorry, I'm sorry, yeah.
Do you acknowledge it? And if you can catch yourself, the person is the recipient, when you catch yourself with these behavioral patterns, and I'm guilty as well, sometimes we become so engrossed in, on a project, or we all can be selfish. I can be an asshole sometimes, I'm not gonna lie. Yeah. And I've, caught myself, and that's what, actually in my marriage, I had a quite successful marriage, considering, there was, ups and downs, and like there is in anyone's marriage, but I had noticed through the years, and my marriage got better every year actually. Amen. In the beginning of the marriage, that we both were kind of selfish, we had egos. It was like we were vying, and it was like two chiefs in the relationship. And when we started, well, I knew my husband since we were 4 years old. We went to the kindergarten with a bell in the 2-room, and I knew I dated him when I was 15, and in my 20s, we reconnected at 30. In the beginning, there was that ego. We had that, we were vying for power and control, one-upping each other, and it was really a detriment to the relationship. But as time went on, there was recognition in order to sustain this relationship in a healthy manner.
And recognition is value. When you start valuing, when you change something,
when you value. And now, this is what we live in a very society now where things are easily discarded, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Because, I'm going to get a new car next year. I'm going to get a new home. I'm going to get a new job. And human beings are now these objects where they're discarded so easily. Like because people don't want to put, people do not want to put the work in the investment anymore. Because we live in a very superficial society.
I heard someone say once, I do a lot of coaching like you do and listen to a lot of coaching. I get coached a lot. Was that if you listen to the words, like there's a reason for metaphors. Falling in love, it doesn't say lifting in love. But think about it, falling in love, it's going to hurt.
Well, it is because it's not a linear journey. You kind of veer off, and sometimes you get off the beaten path, and the road gets a little bumpy, and you got to get that car, it careens off, and it gets a little bumpy, and you have to bring it back on there. And what you just brought up momentarily a few minutes ago in regards to when you get some engrossed and forget about other people's feelings or how it's affecting. If you can catch yourself, I learned this in my relationship, I have done it, and my husband had done it as well, is when we recognize and say, oh, you know what, I caught myself doing that. And you tell the other person, I'm sorry, that was unfair to you. And my husband said to me one time, because I had some childhood wounds and issues I brought to the relationship, and on occasion these would come out. And I remember him saying to me sometime, I even remember where I was, in the kitchen, and he said to me, he goes, why do you have to be that way? And I really did some introspection and self-reflection, and I realized it was coming from a misplaced anger. I was bringing out old wounds and using that artillery on him, because I hadn't had resolution in those areas, or come to terms, or a meeting of my mind, and go inward and see why this person was the recipient of my anger, frustration. And it really was how self-reflected how I was feeling about myself. And this person, unfortunately, took the brunt of it because I was emulating or, going back to my old childhood ways of conducting myself in a situation where I felt threatened usually. Because if he had said something to me, the sense of, he wasn't being critical of me, but I took it as critical. And like the slightest criticism. Until you trust someone, it's very difficult to take criticism on any level, I have learned. And until you have
That's a
the
hard
feeling,
thing to take. It's always hard. I think everything's criticism. I take everything personally. I have to always work on that. I always get my feelings hurt.
Well, the thing is when you trust an individual that they are sincere.
Yes.
This is the thing, it's very difficult to trust other human beings. Yes. I think we're all, even our family members, our bosses.
I know they would never do that. Let me go back and say, oh my God, I was way out of line. I was totally
Well, sometimes it's hard to separate the wheat from the chaff in the sense of, are they being critical of me because something they're going through? Because sometimes that's tough to differentiate. Because sometimes a person is like an animal in a trap and they lash out and bite you. And they don't intentionally lash out to bite you, but they're in so much pain that you become the recipient of those fangs.
And that's where, working on our reaction, right? Like for me, it's always working on how I react. And I'm like, I have to keep saying, if it's good inside, then I have to let it stay good inside and figure out how I'm taking this, or not taking it. So for me, that's, it's something I always work on instead of being reactive right away, trying to process.
Well, sometimes we get our dukes up, because I know you and I have both done that, because we're very, we're high intensity people. I'm very passionate, and so are you. We're very passionate people, and sometimes that's a double-edged sword to have so much passion. It's great when it comes to
when it's all amped up.
When you take it into an amorous situation or something, it can be a good thing when you're passionate about your job, your love life. Passion's great. We applaud it.
Time I gotta bring the jets down and I don't. I'm like, oh, bro, like you gotta relax.
And you get your back up a bit, and you're ready to duke it out, verbally and physically.
Yes. Chill out.
Exactly. And the more yoga brings us down and kind of decompresses that, and also
100%.
in praying, it's very powerful to ask God to help you, or have the Holy Spirit come in and create a more temperate emotional environment for you, which I do daily. I write in a journal every day. I do read devotionals upon arising. I wrote a gratitude journal.
I make videos all day.
Well, that's okay. There's gratitude in that too. When you convey appreciation and gratitude. And I know it's very powerful to do that, to start your day, put your best foot forward and give thanks and praise. Look, like when you look outside, or look at what you are given at this moment. Don't look what everyone else has. Look at your gifts. We're all unique. We're all individual. That's like thumbprints and snowflakes. We all have special gifts, and focus on your beauty, because no one else is like you in the world. No one can duplicate you. Okay, so that's very important. But not to digress, but back to, so I started looking inside and realizing that this person is, the recipient of my issues. And I finally took responsibility, and I went to him and I said, I'm really sorry, Tom. I go, that was so inappropriate. I go, I think I know where it's coming from. It's shelved anger, and you become the recipient, and it's very unfair, and I will try to work on that, and which I did, and in which I continue. It's a process. We all continue.
Yes,
exactly.
It's a journey.
It is definitely a journey.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go in, because I don't want to monopolize a lot of time. I'm going to get into some heavy-duty content here. I want to reiterate and recap what we talked about, because there's a couple of things I think I failed to mention that if anyone has any questions, like I said, they can contact me personally. I garner all my information from the experts. Who I work with and listen to is Dr. Ramani. She's on YouTube. Once again, her knowledge is stratospheric. In addition to Christine Northrup, she is amazing. I've been following her for 25 years. She was considered kind of like the sheep that went astray in her peers. She's an MD. She's very holistic in her thoughts. She was a nonconformist, and she was ostracized or pushed away from her profession because of her insights and intuitions. And I have followed her pretty diligently, and she's been very consistent in her perceptions and intuitions. So I've been kind of, reading her books through the years. There's numerous books she has written. The Wisdom of Menopause for Women, for instance, Dodging Energy Vampires, and Empath's Guide to Avoiding Toxic Relationships is her most recent book. She is also on YouTube. In addition to, there's another person, Scott M. Peck. He wrote The Road Less Traveled. It was on the bestseller lizard. I'm thinking of lizard pose. For umpteen years, and he had written The Road Less Traveled. Scott M. Peck, People of the Lie. This is what we're talking about today. This is all new stuff globally, because we're starting to see the fallout of the selfishness and the arrogance and the lack of empathy and the narcissism, which is on a spectrum. We are all experiencing this on some level. I've experienced it. I see it in my office. I see it through my friendships. I see it in my family dynamics. And this is a big issue. And we cannot keep closing. It's like when we close the door and we got the messy closet, we're all guilty of that. I know I am. You open the door and everything falls out. We're getting to the point, or when the pot starts to overboil, you can't contain that anymore. This is where this is at, folks. So let's recap when we were talking about narcissism, the different phases or stages or cycles, there's different names.
Yeah.
And I mentioned, and some of it's applicable when I'm talking about different relationships, for instance, in the community, whether it's in a work corporate environment, whether it's a family type of situation, friendships, co-workers, romantic relationships. Some of this is applicable and some of it is not. A lot of it does seem to have a common thread. I'll start back and harken back to the romantic relationships, which can also be related to family as well, because there's love within families, or perceived love anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 4 stages, and I had started with love bombing, and devalue, discard, and hoover. These are the stages, and it's a universal. This is not exclusive just to one segment of the population. This is a universal. It's kind of like we have a universal distance we keep with our faces. It's a universal. It's like a foot away. This encompasses the whole. What is, how many people? Almost 8 billion people in the world. I think we're up to something like that. So this will pertain to many. And love bombing, I had mentioned, there is a lot of things chemically in the brain that goes on with that. And people, I'm going to harken back to why this even occurs, just to touch base. Object constancy, a child is raised in an environment. Usually, I've been reading more and more, the person usually is narcissistic that raises the child. There's more and more evidence pointing. The person has had their childhood wounds that have not been resolved, or there's certain dynamics, like I was mentioning about myself earlier, they have not been resolved. The child becomes a recipient. It's a double-edged sword in the sense of sometimes the child can be given, treated like the golden child, whether it's a male or female, and they can do no wrong, and they're like a godsend, and they're the best, and they're superior, and they're put on a pedestal. If they make mistakes, it's glossed over. So this child actually is not getting, like, we have to have balance in our life. So that child has to be disciplined if it's done something that's incorrect, is offensive, and that will be glossed over and condoned. So this child grows up believing that it can do no wrong, it's superior, it develops arrogance, self-centeredness, entitlement, lack of empathy, because it can't connect, because it can't put themselves in other people's shoes when it does something incorrect, does something wrong, so the perception, their perfection. So that's a form of abuse, actually. And of course, you go on the opposite end, where the child is abused because I was using different scenarios. Maybe the father's working long hours. He is not giving the wife the attention she needs. She's not getting her needs met. The family, is taking the brunt, and the child becomes a scapegoat. And I was that child in the family growing up. I was the scapegoat in the family. I was the whipping girl. There's whipping boys. There was whipping girl. I was the people pleaser, the fixer. Oh gosh, well, I gotta fix this. Because you want that love. You'll do anything for that love. And this is where object constancy takes place, because you either shut yourself down completely, and this is where the lack of empathy comes into play, and the entitlement, the arrogance, the self-centered, and it breeds into adulthood, lack of integrity, selfishness, and this is what the adult will blossom into eventually, okay? Or you can go in the other direction where you're too much. Oh, you can't do enough for that person, you want to fix things, you want to people please, you're so hungry for that love, you'll do anything to get it. So these are the 2 scenarios you can get developing narcissistic personality or too empathic also. Because sometimes you can go too empathic, and that develops codependency. And these are not things that are going to benefit the empathic individual. It's a detriment to them. Right. Because when you become too empathic, you become a doormat. Because you'll do anything to get that love. You're so hungry, and you're so needy, and you're so desperate, and so you put yourself aside, and your self-care and your needs go out, you're thrown out the window, because you'll do anything to get that love. It's like oxygen to you. The resultant is the same when it comes to narcissism. If a child's abused in these 2 different type of scenarios, or you can get the empath out of it too. So if they're abused, unmercifully due to family dynamics, or the golden child due to that dynamic, it can cultivate a narcissistic personality. Also stemming off of that is empathic personalities, which also contribute. They do the dance with the narcissist, and within the family dynamic, corporate, romantic, what have you. And this object constancy, they're also finding out, now this is the experts, not me, they think there may potentially, highly probable even, nature versus nurture now I'm talking about, that there also may be a component where the frontal lobe of the brain is not fully developed. This is where emotional intelligence comes from. Now, emotional intelligence by Einstein's theory is one of the most highest forms of intelligence. People aren't aware. We measure our IQ through testing, but Einstein had said emotional intelligence is really, which stems from intuition. Emotional intelligence and intuition are very, combined. You can't measure that. Just like I was saying, you can't measure when someone's being emotionally abused. You don't have the tangible evidence of the abuse.
Right.
So it's not recognized. That's why police don't recognize it. You have to have the, tangible, if you've been beaten, you have to have that tangible proof. That's why it's very insidious. And this is what the problem lies, because if you cannot present a form of tangible evidence, your goose is cooked. And you're in that pressure cooker perhaps for life. And this is how these relationships, are cultivated, because you really don't have anything to substantiate it that's tangible, so the person kind of lives in their own private hell, because of that. But, so that's a theory too. So you take the frontal lobe not being properly developed, lack of emotional intelligence and intuition, that's because then empathy isn't going to be there then. Because emotional intelligence has to do with empathy, putting yourself in other people's shoes. So if you don't possess that, you can see where it'll create these type of demonic, like Jezebel spirit, like people.
Yeah.
So if you take nature versus nurture and combine it, it's like the perfect storm. There you have. This spawns a narcissist. This is the spawning of a narcissist. So love bombing, what happens during that stage, and in this case, this can be different type of scenarios. Typically it is romantic. I'm using it because it's applicable and many people can identify with it. A person will, be very charismatic, I had mentioned. A wonderful personality. They're kind. They appear compassionate. They appear humble. They seem to have all these components of generosity, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, like what a wonderful human being I've met. They might be a little flirtatious even, and charming is a big one. I've heard it from the experts that someone comes out extraordinarily charming, run the other way. And I never knew that. I've got taken in by that. Especially when you're vulnerable.
The other way when
somebody's extremely charming,
people want attention.
Well, because say you're in a vulnerable position.
They mirror what you're doing, so
you remember
telling
that.
them,
They mirror
this
that.
is what I want, this, and
Right.
they give you what
They
you
watch
want.
you.
So
What happens is your brain chemistry changes, and you create a cocktail in your
it's
brain.
like rosy glasses, right? Putting on.
Especially when you have sexual relationships with these people. This is what I didn't mention.
Yeah.
This is where the cocktail even gets more intensified. Because when you meet people like this, and they mirror you and mimic you because they're learning you. They want to get all your good qualities.
Yeah.
Because they don't have it. Because what happens, not to harken back to object, constancy, they develop what's called a false ego. The ego is actually, these people are very insecure people. They'll kind of call it armadillo syndrome. They'll come off in society like they're huff and puff and strong and alpha males, alpha females. They'll come, but they're like armadillos because down the inside is like I used an example of this, bless you, of the souffle, how it deflates and implodes. And when you take back the coat of armor, if you will, it's hollow and it's all mushy inside. You have a scared child that is insecure. They can never be alone. Most of these people in relationships, romantic especially, or corporate or anything, they always have what we call supply, which I had discussed. And sometimes it can be a primary, secondary, and tertiary supply. And I didn't explain that. they're like constant gardeners.
Supplies like the udders on the cow where they're just squeezing.
Yes,
it
and
like
different,
cow.
yeah, exactly, to get, very good, I love, that's a beautiful analogy, I mean, that was like brilliant.
Well, you describe this. I'm
Well,
just saying.
that's a phenomenal example you just presented, Shane. I mean, I call it the constant gardener, where, you know, they're weeding this person out,
And then
and they're planting
setting up the next
seeds.
ones.
They're planting seeds and looking for that, what they can garner and extract from supply. Like I mentioned, supply, you're an object. These people don't have the ability to have
Yeah,
feelings.
if you can't feel compassion.
They don't
if
feel.
you can't feel what someone might be feeling, then
It's like a black hole that has to
That's-
be constantly fed. It's insatiable. It's a hollow vessel, and they have to go out and bring it out to bring in constantly. So that's why they'll juggle women. I call it like a narcissistic harem. They got women on a carousel, and they spin it around what they want tonight. It's like, you know, what is the woman du jour today or for the month? Or it happened with men. Men are treated like this as well. So they have constantly supply backed up. So when they're wooing you and you got pinwheels in your eyes, they got a couple on the side because they got their little, you know, they got the phone going, go, okay, well, this one does this for me. This one does this. This one does this. And they usually end up marrying someone or hooking up with someone. Primary supply usually is somebody that becomes a doormat eventually because they've been beaten down so much. And usually these types of people are empathic individuals. I'm trying to say empathetic. My tongue is thick. So these people usually gravitate to people that they can break down into submission, their self-esteem, and they take their energy away. They become like a doormat. They can manipulate them. They're malleable. Their self-esteem's, you know, totally in self-confidence. You can come in like a self-confident person, and this person will chip away insidiously and whittle away at your self-esteem until you're a small constituent and a sniveling. You have virtually no self, and this is when they can run around on you and work their voodoo and take another supply. And you're worried about how to please this person. You're trying to overcompensate. This is where the cognitive dissonance comes in. I use that term because when you do get someone that's love bombed, the chemicals of dopamine are released in oxytocin in women predominantly. And once a dopamine high leaves, it's like a hit. It's like people become like a drug. You're a drug to the narcissist, and say you're empathic, the narcissist becomes your drug because you're releasing these brain chemicals. And I used the analogy of trauma bonding. Trauma bonding is when you release these chemicals, and it's called intermittent reinforcement. I use the analogy of Skinner's rat, how it gets the pellet. Now, the brain starts releasing these chemicals where it's seeking out that pellet. It'll do anything to get that pellet. Well, it's trying to go back to the love bombing stage. You're trying to recapture that essence. You'll do anything desperately to go back to that. Well, he was like this or she was like this. Like, where'd that person go? I know they're there. They were never there. It was a magic show.
Yep.
It was used to lure you in as prey in a predatory sense to extract narcissistic supply, whether that's money, sex, recognition in the community. Image is all important. Like the image, and you do one slight thing to mar that image or take anything away from that, because they want to be revered as the best at everything. They're in competition constantly. They want attention, adulation, admiration, approval. They need to constantly be filled. Their cup is always empty. It's a never-ending process. So your brain, when you're under cognitive dissonance, as an empathic individual, will do anything to please this person. See, this is where it goes back to my childhood, where my wounds are, because I'm thinking, well, I'm not doing enough. Well, you know, maybe I did, you know, if I kept a cleaner house, or, you know, gave them more sex, or, you know, got a second job, or, you know, saved up for this vacation and surprised them. You could stand on your head and spit jelly beans and do backward flips and be Miss America, like I said, with an IQ of Einstein and a dowry to choke a horse. They could not care less because they get bored. Mm-hmm. This is another strong characteristic is boredom. They get bored of you easy because once that dopamine in their brain wears off, they have that other type of supply lined up, whether it's business associates, romantic partners. Like I said, they're the constant gardener, not to reiterate that. They're weeding out this one, they're putting seeds, and this is growing, and they're cultivating things over here to love bomb so they can garner resources from that when it's matured a little bit more, when they lock you into their narcissistic web, because your dopamine and oxytocin, especially once you have sexual relations, it's even worse, because now when you have sexual relations, this is a fact, with someone, it's not just sex, it's a spiritual exchange. You're having a spiritual exchange, so now it's reinforced your connection to that person in a sense of you become more manipulative, because once they have you in their clutches, they can work more of their control, their power manipulation, and this is when you might fall in love with this person at this juncture. And once you start to fall in love with this person, what happens is, this is where it gets real interesting. Pay attention. I was confused about this myself. This is where it's really confusing. And Dr. Rahman, he clarified this for me, because I had to go over it a few times. In the beginning, when they're love bombing you and saying all these wonderful things, because they'll compliment you too. They'll, because this was, you got to lure in the prey. You got to do whatever it takes. You pull all the steps. You learn the person. You observe. You emulate, and they're taking past supply information. They're taking they're going to use your good qualities for the next person they reel in. So they're mirroring everything to use that futuristically for the next victim. Okay, so your chemicals in your brain are run amok, and this trauma bonding occurs because it's intermittent reinforcement. This person will push-pull with you. In other words, they'll do what's called crumbing. They'll throw you a crumb here and there, and you'll do anything to gobble that up, and you're just like that Skinner's rat. You keep tapping, so you're overcompensating. People are getting facelifts. They're keeping a cleaner house. They're doing anything. They're in denial. People will say, well, so-and-so's doing this to you. Don't you see it? Maybe a family member might mention it, or a good friend, because that's what good friends do.
Yeah.
They'll be in denial. Well, they had a bad childhood, a rough day at work. They'll make excuses. This person's in cognitive dissonance because their brain chemistry has been altered. That's a fact. Your brain chemistry, their neural pathways have been affected because you're addicted to this person now. And you're at their mercy, and you can be manipulated and controlled and abused now. And they can go out and run off and get in their hero garage, or their other business associates that they want to suckle from. Whomever the suckling or supply is coming from, they're going to keep pulling in. Empty vessels, empty shells, but they know how to manipulate. It's like a terrorist. Just like when a terrorist, if they don't have any conscience, they're going to come in and do, create destruction and decimate whatever, because their mind works like a terrorist in a way.
Yeah,
They don't
you
have.
can't feel from someone. That
Right.
just leads to pure destruction.
So these people, what happens is the person now is being devalued, because this is the most important thing I'm trying to convey at this point, because it's very confusing. So when they were love bombing you and all this wonderful stuff, you're high on life, you're high, I always say taking a toke off the narc pipe, you're high as a kite, and because this is like an addiction, a mutual exchange opportunity here. And the person's like, all of a sudden the person isn't going to compliment you anymore. You're not going to go on those dinners or trips anymore. You're not going to be getting, you won't get any compliments. Now you're going to start getting criticisms like, I don't like that dress on you, or you really want to wear that. I'm just giving some slight examples. You didn't do the dishes, right, or that meal was a little, this is what's going to start to happen. You're going to get devalued. And when you get devalued, it's going to bring up your childhood wounds from your upbringing. Oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. So you try to overcompensate more. This is what goes on. So they're devaluing you, and they know they have you there. So you're not going anywhere. You're locked in. Once they lock you in, then they can go out and run around town and do whatever they got to do to get their needs met, to fulfill that insatiable hunger that will never be fulfilled. But this is why they devalue you. This is Dr. Brahmani and the experts, not me talking. Now they start to project really what's going on inside of them. Let me repeat that. Now the devaluing has to do, they don't really feel worthy. They feel insecure. They have low self-esteem. They're not confident people. So now this projection is vomited onto you. Okay? Very important information. And I had to learn that over and over.
Yeah.
And that's being devalued. And during the devalue stage, if someone has the wherewithal or gumption and they're getting counseling or they are friends are talking to them and say, wait, like this is very dysfunctional, this is unhealthy, you're in an unhealthy relationship, you need to step back and objectively and see what's going on. We're seeing it. You're not, because this is where people don't understand why people can't jump ship right away.
Yeah.
Your brain chemistry is run amok.
Wow.
You're addicted, just like you would be to a drug or an alcohol, to this person, and they're addicted to you, and you're trauma bonded. Like I said, intermittent reinforcement's taking place. You become at the mercy, like a captor. You become their bitch, and they're gonna go out and do whatever they can, and you're like a sniveling thing in the corner, ready for a rubber suit in the paddy wagon at that point, until you extricate yourself and have insight where this is coming from. And when you start to get that, I went through this. When you start to get insight where this comes from and take a stance, because you start to, realize that your role and why you even succumbed to this in the first place, because of your childhood issues, I call it shadow work. You can look it up. When we get entangled or embroiled in these relationships, often we have shadow work that has not been done. What is shadow work? Childhood issues. We have attachment styles of abandonment and rejection. And as I mentioned back when I discussed narcissism earlier, usually these two individuals, whether narcissistic or empathic, for instance, both operate under having abandonment issue or rejection. We have attachment styles. That's another thing to look up and I'll talk about.
Yeah.
So the thing is you go back and you have these feelings of insecurity and I'm not good enough and I can never do enough. And the inner child, and you have childhood wounds that have not had resolution. This is why a lot of these people have to have someone in their life constantly. I've been alone for 4 years and I'm okay with it. Am I lonely? Yes. But I've worked on myself inwardly for 4 years. That's been my goal. My inward work and my practice and my good friendships and nurturing and cultivating all of my inner talents and gifts. That's what my focus has been, solely. Because for me to be a better person, for me, myself, and I in society, I needed to do that. I didn't want to be part of all this circus show, okay?
For sure.
So when you get the chutzpah or wherewithal about you, and you have recognition of what's going on and why you're being devalued, in the process of, and where it's coming from, you will be discarded if you challenge the individual. The slightest criticism, like I was mentioning about my husband. Now, when he gave me constructive criticism, I took it in as a form of love coming from him because I trusted where he was coming from. It wasn't coming from a place where we discussed, where I was being devalued for their own personal gain to control and manipulate for power because of their lack of integrity and defeat in their ego-centric illness or dysfunction.
Right.
I knew it was coming from a good place. So when he said it, I didn't get like, oh my God, because trust takes a long time to cultivate. You can't cultivate trust like lickety-split.
No,
That's a process. So the thing is, but when you present slight criticism to a narcissistic personality, that's called a narcissistic injury, and they're going to lash out with a vengeance. You're going to get gaslit. You're going to get campaign smeared. It happened to me. I'm not going to go into my story today, but I studied this extensively. I made it. Other than working on my business and myself as a person and having my friendships and my different gifts I've worked on, I have focused on this. I see it with clarity. And these people cannot take the slightest criticism because they're up here and you're down here. And the devaluing, as I talked about, when it comes to when you vibrate to a high frequency, these people are vibrating down here. Because the negative, when you cheat and lie and do not have integrity, and your ego supersedes all the good qualities of life, of empathy, putting yourself in other people's shoes, doing the right thing, right from wrong, you're vibrating to a low frequency, okay? So my goal was to vibrate to a high frequency. So when you give criticism, that's called a narcissistic injury, and they will retaliate with a vengeance. They'll cut you off, they sever like a guillotine, you will be totally high karate out of their life. Because they already got people lined up. So they're going to okay, this one's lined up, I'll call her. And the whole love bombing hit the reset button, rinse cycle, rewash, starts all over again with the next person. Because these people don't self-reflect or become introspective.
Right.
They're almost damaged goods in some ways. I mean, this isn't me
Yeah,
talking.
because this up here
This-
is not developed where you can
Well,
have compassion or empathy towards somebody. That's
Exactly.
the problem.
So discard happens when you make them accountable. Like I've tried to have conversations with people to make them accountable. They wouldn't have the conversations with me, whether it was dealing with this county, they were cowards. I'll talk to anybody. I'm transparent. I'm trying to be authentic. I don't care what the subject matter is. I will be authentic and bring to the table as much honesty as I can. And I'll try to see your point of view as well.
Right,
It's all, you have to have this exchange of this flux.
yeah.
These people know this is where the ego comes in, all powerful Oz. And I told you the story behind that when you pull the curtain back. And I've dealt with these cowards because they won't come forward because they're not authentic, they're not sincere, they lack empathy, they operate on a narcissistic spectrum. I don't care if it's an individual or a corporation, a community, they all coalesce. And this is why we have dysfunctional people, because like I was going back to that child, everything's not all black and white or good and bad. I think that we're all good. We all have flaws, and we all have positive characteristics. And a child needs to learn that early on. And this is where a lot of these people that walk around with their heads in the clouds, and these movie stars and these actors and these singers and these people in corporations and doctors and lawyers, CEOs, salesmen, because they do not see that they have flaws. Everybody else is blemished. Everybody else is tainted because they're not capable of having flaws, because it goes back. And this is where a child needs to see both black and white, and which makes gray,
Right.
because they do not allow that child to develop that in object constancy, so either good or all bad. So in the love bombing stage, you're all good, you're perfection, you're beautiful. I found my soulmate, my twin flame. But once you start showing flaws and you start challenging or taking accountability for something inappropriate, you're thrown out. Like I said, like a tissue used, you're a rag doll thrown in the pile, or and then they're gonna come back and hoover you down the pipe, because they're gonna start to realize, oh, the grass wasn't greener. That person has some flaws too. They're not perfection. Oh gosh, I kind of like that other one better after all. Do you think, maybe if I can see if they're vulnerable enough and going through something in their life, usually because people get ensnared when they're at their lowest. Like I got ensnared when I was at the lowest in my life on a few occasions, and it was like, wow, now I can look back and, in retrospect and see this, because and I see it happening with people I know in this office right now, and my patients. They look for the wounded bird, they look for someone that's hurting, that is low, vibrating low themselves because of the occurrence that may have happened in their life, and they're not at their best, and their childhood wounds, they're bleeding all over, they need a tourniquet emotionally and physically, and these vultures, they smell it like shark smell blood, and they zoom in, and I've seen it, it's happened to me, I've seen it happen to my patients, I've seen it happen to my friendships, and it's not like we're stupid people.
Right.
Some of these people are,
Well,
they're
it's
very
that charming
intelligent
part.
people.
And, that goes back to someone being charming.
In
People
the
like to-
family, and within my family, I've seen it too. I have seen it within my family. You have seen it with
Oh,
your
yeah.
family,
Yeah,
and you know as well as I do. Try sitting down and have a conversation with these people.
can't happen.
What would happen?
Nothing. They would just come after you, like me. They would just say.
Okay,
oh,
and what do you
they
think's
wouldn't
going
even-
on?
They wouldn't even have a conversation, though. That's the thing. The conversation wouldn't exist. The phone would be hung up. There wouldn't be.
Well, because we call that. Remember I talked about what that was called? They ghost you. Here's what different words. It's ghosting. You get the silent treatment.
And you end up.
And you get stonewalled, which is a silent treatment. They do that on purpose, by the way. Because they know. Because they want a reaction out of you.
But
They want you to jump over, jump through the
Exactly.
hoops.
They want a
They
reaction.
want a
yeah.
reaction.
And then they can say, "See, I told you, right?" They'll bring
Yeah,
what
because
they
then
know
you look
about
like
you
the bad guy.
because they pulled out the information so they could use it when they were here.
Very
So-
good.
so
You nailed it, brother.
When
You
you
nailed
can see
it.
it and you're confident, that's why daily habits are important to
But
diet.
this is where we come in with
Because
high
I slay
vibration.
people quick. Like, listen, I make decisions right or wrong that are right for me,
Right.
right? So I'm very careful bad company can corrupt good character.
Well, you know, the healthier you get and the higher you vibrate, and we talked about high vibratory type of things. Now, what I did the other night, for instance, is I'm an artist. I draw portraits and nudes. I went back to that. I like to play the piano. I'm not very good, but I like to play by ear. I do certain things to fill myself, you know, and inspire and lift. I have fantastic friendships. I'm very blessed with fantastic friendships.
Yeah.
And I travel and I visit places that give me joy. And I love being around water, so that's, you know, I'm going to be going again shortly. But the thing is I love to cook and bake, like I'm having you guys over tomorrow night. And Sunday night I have my financial advisors coming for dinner. He's on vacation. He's been a blessing in my life. He's an astrologer, a financial advisor, and he fixes musical instruments. He's worked with a lot of the pros in the field, him and his daddy. So he's coming Sunday night for dinner as well. And lovely soul, pure heart, authentic, and these are the people I want in my life, because we need more authenticity, folks. The more authentic you become and the higher your vibes go, you see this. Like I said, the emperor with no clothes. I use that childhood. You don't become Charlie Brown as much anymore. You have to see these telltale signs early on in the game. You have to be very observant when you interact with other people. And lots of times they'll pick up on your vibes, and they'll know you can see right through them.
Yeah.
And then they'll, you know, run off, you know, like a scared rabbit, okay? So this is the thing, is we want to lift ourselves. We all have different gifts. And I love exercise too, as you do. You run and swimming, yoga, whatever it is that you enjoy. Some people like tennis. Some people like to go out and fly a kite, for God's sakes. So there's all different things people like, and you want to, what's that?
Have you seen the new, I don't know what they call it, pickleball or something? I don't know.
Pickleball?
I don't know. There's something, it's like these mini tennis courts. They're over.
Oh, okay, I think I know what
And
you're
they
talking
play
about.
it's like a lot of older people, so it's not a full tennis court.
Okay.
And they stay busy doing. I think it's something, but it's pretty cool. I haven't tried it.
Pickleball, I guess I have heard of that. Is that popularized in England?
I don't know.
Was that the origin of where that?
I don't know. I'm a runner. It's not.
I gotta look it up now. I'm interested because I like to look different things up.
Yeah.
But next week, we're going to talk about hoovering. And I'm going to keep recapping about what we go, because is it coming more?
Yeah.
I try to create a big picture. So that's where I revisit some of this as reinforcers, tie it together. Like I said, I had to go over this stuff a lot and see the common thread or how this all works together to create a form of clarity so the public understands the dynamics in this different cycles or stages or phases which we incur. And like I said, this can happen within the family, within corporate America, globally, what we've been dealing with, the leaders in the world. Hello?
Yeah.
And I'm going to get into that, how people cover up for others. And this has caused a big problem. Because when someone does something, there's right from wrong. And if you know the difference, you shouldn't be covering up for that person. I don't care if it's a family member that you love. You don't cover up lies. You know.
Well, it eats your soul away.
It erodes the soul.
Yeah. They always say if someone does something, they always say they couldn't wait to be caught. I know it sounds odd.
Oh, I've heard that with
But
cheating.
they say
Yes.
that, you know, with
spousal
whatever,
cheating.
whether it's cheating, whether it's
Drug.
stealing, whether
Drug.
it's
Yes,
doesn't
good
matter.
point.
They say that they were tired of being on the run.
Well,
You
it's
can't sleep at
exhausting.
night.
Well, these people, actually,
Yes.
narcissists, this is true
They're
too.
angry and
They don't sleep well.
no.
A lot of these narcissists
You
do
can't.
not sleep well.
You can't.
They do not, because
If you don't live in harmony
their
with
conscience they're riddled with shame. That's another thing I've not brought up, is
so they
like
get angry. and
low
mean.
vibration, shame and guilt, which are one of the lowest vibratory energies is what these people possess.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what cultivates manipulation, control, and power, because they have all this. They got to keep covering up and putting layers on their deception, their cloaks of deception, and layers and layers. And like I said, they don't want to look inward because it ain't so pretty. And this is how we all heal from this dysfunction, whether you're empathic or, you know, that's
Yeah, and what
almost
that means when you look inward, just so you know, like the actual, it's you retell the story to yourself the way you looked at something. You know, I'm just going to say this one thing. These two gentlemen were interviewed, and they said, how come you're an alcoholic? He asked the one
Yes.
son, and he said, because I was raised by an alcoholic. And he asked the other son, he said,
Mhm.
how come you're not an alcoholic?
Oh,
And he
good
said,
point.
because I was raised by an alcoholic.
beautiful.
So,
Different stories, different
you know,
paths.
But you can retell your story. is what I'm telling you. And you need to retell it. That's how you become better and not bitter. See, you need to, anger eats the container it's in.
This is true, like you were talking about the snake and the tail.
Yeah, you have, it has to be inside here. This has to
Well,
be.
that happened with my brother. He died and he took his life. He was an alcoholic. And I'm not trying to brag, but my other cousin works with the Kushners, Jared and Charles Kushner. He's high-end real estate. I mean, stratospheric. He's a lovely man. He can be a little bit up there woo-woo too. But this is a situation. My brother was very attractive. He looked like Brad Pitt. He was a fantastic musician, played piano by ear. They grew up like brothers together. They grew up together. My brother and my cousin. My cousin is extraordinarily successful. My brother is 6 feet under. This is what happened in my family. And I asked my cousin, I'm like, geez, they go, how is it you attain that level? And you guys grew up in the same house pretty much, because my brother and I didn't grow up together consistently. And I asked him, how'd you attain that stat? You know, how did this happen? Because I'm learning stuff from him. Because I'm hoping I got some of those genes when it comes to his drivenness. And he's a lovely person. He has a good soul. He's not like Mr. Arrogant or I'm above you, la-di-da type. Because I couldn't deal with that. I don't give a shit what you got going on, brother.
We're choosers,
I could not care
losers.
less.
You
You're
know,
right.
what we are is
Yes.
a cumulative equal sign of the choices we make.
That's right,
Right?
absolutely.
So who you are today, and whatever problems you got into, you have to evolve to someone new to solve them. You can't be the same person.
Like you were saying, you say every day, you know, you change. It's like you know, like you change
It's
your
like
clothes.
a tree with getting rings on
Right,
it.
and
You're not the
drops.
baby tree that was planted 30 years ago. You've been through how many storms, how many winters, how many
Exactly.
springs, how many summers. That's called wisdom.
Right.
And when you get, and I tell people, when you're tired of being sick and tired, that's when change comes. When you're tired of being sick and tired.
This is true.
When you're wore out from being wore out, you choose.
This
Because the pain is the same. Listen, I feel the same pain you feel, but my results are different. Self-discipline is different than going to a job and being paid to be disciplined. It's a big
Yes,
difference.
yes.
Self-discipline. And that's what it takes.
And so that comes from self-care and self-care.
And you don't have to work for
self-love.
yourself, but you can't sit on the TV, you can't watch the news. Listen, and I'm gonna go on a little tangent here, but you know, back in the day, you watched the 6 o'clock news, and if you didn't watch what was in that hour, that was it. You didn't watch it. And kids were in bed before 10, so you didn't watch the 10 or 11. It was 6 o'clock news. That was it. So you were busy doing things of evolution of yourself.
Yes.
You weren't watching 24-hour news. To hear the same thing all over every day, to watch the same people on your Facebook page, it's eroding you as a person.
Because, like I said, we all are individuals like snowflakes, thumbprints. We all have beautiful gifts. I try when I meet people in this office or friends, or I tell them about their gifts, and it's from my heart and sincere. Because some people never get a compliment or an acknowledgement of their beauty, their inner beauty, their heart. They're kind of taught, you know, glossed over, because people want to talk about themselves all the time, and they like to hear themselves heard. And sometimes people don't get a compliment on what their gifts are, and they may not have been touched that day or given a token of a genuine gift from the heart being spoken. So let's, you know, that's what I kind of want to leave people.
That to people.
Oh,
and you know what? If you really listen to people and get to know them, everyone has a story, but you only know what Brenda said in the beginning, authentic. So when you hear their story, people that project a lot of love have a lot of pain. Because you don't know love. You don't know love that deep if you don't have pain. Some people's gift is the gift of long suffering, right? I have the gift of long suffering, right? So some people have that gift. That takes a gift. You know, for me, running for hours is I've been through hell, so it feels good to run and feel good at the end of it.
But you're not really running away from your pet. Your running has led you to yourself.
Joy. Oh,
Like some people say, oh, you know, when the analogy of running or symbolic, you could be running away, but you've run towards yourself. You ran towards yourself by running.
It's like the yoga, right? Like you have taught, like I had no idea about yoga. You touched me and Christy with yoga, and that was something, like next week we're going to do one day. We're going to start doing one day at home.
Yeah.
Not two yet.
Well, I'm trying to encourage that because
she's a good teacher.
So thank you so much.
Yeah,
2 or 3 times a week. I love teaching, and like I said, I teach at York College. high intensity interval training I have for 17 years. I love teaching the athletes.
And what
I
else
get
do
a nice
you do? You do the yoga, but what you do what?
I
Body
swim.
combat?
I swim through. This will be tomorrow or today. I'm swimming actually. I put in 4 hours of swimming this week. I do body combat. I do athletic challenge with Janine, fabulous at Heritage Hills. Love her. Michelle at JCC, body combat. Love her. Victoria at LA Fitness. I go to Zumba, Spanish and Latin dancing. Boom, boom, baby. Love her. These women are all gifted. They're all talented women, and I love what they have to bring to the table. I swim. I do yoga 3 times. Oh, Larry and his lovely bride, I was called Marie Noel, teaches hot yoga. I take yoga with them every Saturday for the most part. I love these people. I love the group. And we're like brothers and sisters there. I'm so blessed. So I take all this beauty that's out there and focus on all the high vibratory energies that are presented, whether we're talking food, the people, the different destination spots in the world.
No, besides all that, you eat really well. You take the time because that takes time.
I'm an avid reader too. I love to read.
And you have, you're an entrepreneur.
I am an
So
entrepreneur.
for entrepreneurs that say, I don't have time to get healthy, I don't have time to eat healthy, what I wanted to let you know is it's dispelled. Like,
Well, yeah, I want other people to say you can do it. It has to take
And
precedence over everything. It is like breathing, eating, and sleeping. My nutrition, I juice every morning. I write in a journal every day. I read devotionals daily. And I read the Bible every day. And I read stuff that nourishes my mind, body, soul, heart, for my mental well-being. So I can be better for myself, so I can be better for you.
So you don't need to compare yourself to be like,
No.
well, I can't be Brenda. It's about getting started.
It is, we
all it's
all
about.
have gifts, and they're, I'm very, I admire gifts in people, like with you, I can't imagine running like you run. Or Christy has a technical brain she possesses, she's extremely intelligent when it comes to organizational skills, technologically speaking. I'm like, oh my gosh, you can open my
Her yoga
refrigerator.
is amazing. Christy's
Yes,
amazing.
Christy's a
Yoga.
beautiful
I'm like,
soul.
wow, she does
And you both will
100%.
do very well in yoga, and
Yeah.
we'll get started. I'm gonna show one exercise quick, and we can
Yes.
get started in the yoga.
Kylie's here today for yoga.
Oh, cool, I'm
Yeah.
loving it.
And we're about to hit 11:11 with this.
Do that. Okay, that's a bewitching hour.
All right.
Okay,
So
yoga
you
is
wanna
coming
make
up
sure-
after this, and I mentioned, next week I'm gonna get into the core. I kind of mentioned I
Let me
would
make
last
sure
week,
you're
but
on there.
I want to show you
You want to back
another
up
arm
some.
exercise, the intrinsic muscles, we had discussed, I'll go over them briefly and add this to the repertoire, and we will be hitting 4 exercises next week. So I've given these 100 a day, like I said, keeps the doctor away, works the intrinsic, the muscles closest to the bone, slice, 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 100 a day, okay? Then I gave the slap, like a basketball slap, double slap, 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 double slap. Do it to music, folks, you can. I talked about traffic cop hands, right? Insect pull in a butterfly. Traffic cop, pull a butterfly in. Traffic cop, pull a butterfly in. 100, work up to 100. If you get exhausted, and corkscrew out the arms. I corkscrew a lot when I swim when we do side stroke. Helps immeasurably. And also this next one is going to be like you're picking up something daintily. You daintily pick up a tissue, and then you flow it on out. You pick up a tissue. See my fingers? They're kind of like teepee style, or whatever, You're pulling them up, and you're sliding it down. You pull it up, and you slide it down. Okay, you work up to 100. Trust me, once you do a bunch of those, folks, you're going to feel it. Have a wonderful weekend. We've been blessed with this gorgeous weather. It's extremely temperate, and thank God for the gifts that we have all been bestowed upon us today.